Well, Labor backbencher Michael Danby has been critical of the actions of the Malaysian government in the past. Last year, he presented the Malaysian High Commissioner with a letter protesting against the trial of the country's opposition leader, Anwar Ibrahim. When it comes to asylum seekers policy, Mr Danby believes the Malaysia deal is the right way forward. Well, he's speaking with our political editor, Lyndall Curtis.
Michael Danby, welcome to ABC News 24. You've been critical of Malaysia in the past. Why do you think the Malaysian solution for asylum seekers is workable?
I think it's had an unusual effect on Malaysia already with the repeal of the Internal Security Act, with them agreeing to a higher standard for the treatment of the potential asylum seekers that were being sent back from Australia. And in fact, that's led them to raising the bar in the treatment of the standard of all people who are seeking asylum in that country. And remember, there's 80 or 90,000 of them. There's a lot of people there. I think Malaysia is under a lot of pressure internationally for a higher standard of democratic behaviour. And one of the things I don't think people have thought of the consequence of is if this agreement was to pass, with the Australian media and the UNHCR keeping a strong eye on it, it would have a beneficial effect on the human rights situation overall in Malaysia.
But do you really think it would lead to Malaysia, say, in the end, coming close to implementing laws that would be agreeable with the UN Refugee Convention, or even in the end signing it?
I would hope so. I think it's already progress that the ministers have been able to get them to agree not to refoul people, to process the treatment of refugees there, not to just leave them sitting where they were. I'm not simply concerned with the legal issues of what's in this legislation or without this legislation. The practical effect in Malaysia is very important, and we have to be mindful of the fact that you've always got to have places for offshore processing. Mr Fraser had them for the Vietnamese refugees. And the thing that Australia's got to face up to, as well as the situation in Malaysia, is we've got to take more people. Other countries have got to take more people if we do have these offshore processing centres. We've got to get them out of the refugee camps. And one of the steps towards that was the 4,000 people, mainly from Burma, who were coming to Australia. But if we have offshore processing, we cannot simply leave it at that. We're not just shuffling these people off to be dealt with. They have to be their merits examined and then taken to various countries who will accept them.
So the Prime Minister has announced she's effectively strengthened the amendments she was offering to, or she wants to put into Parliament to change the Migration Act to allow offshore processing again. The amendments have changed from the public interest to the national interest. They include the concept of non-refoulement and that asylum seekers transferred to countries like Malaysia have to be processed. Was that strengthening necessary?
I think they're all very good developments. They all should address the concerns, some people would say faux concerns with human rights that the Liberal Party, the opposition, have expressed. If they're serious about trying to deter people coming by boat, this is the way to do it. It has a beneficial effect in Malaysia. We've already seen that. It'll have an even more beneficial effect if it actually happens. And it's certainly better than dragging people back to the edge of Indonesia and just leaving them there, which is a question that was posed to the Liberal Party spokesman and he was unable to answer on the weekend.
It's more than the Liberal Party having concerns. Members of your own party, particularly in the left, have concerns about these amendments and about the Malaysia deal. What do you say to them?
Well, I say that don't just look at the black letter changes to the law, look at the political effect that this might have. There's always going to be offshore processing. The question is what Australia's attitude is towards bringing more refugees to this country and to making sure that people who are in Malaysia, now with these amendments, these 800 will have to be dealt with. They'll have to go somewhere eventually, maybe New Zealand, maybe Canada, maybe the United States, maybe Australia. But we want all of the 80,000 of those people who are sitting in camps in Malaysia to be dealt with, and I think these amendments address the faux concern of the opposition, and I think they'll address the concerns of people within our party.
But given you've been so critical of Malaysia in the past, what confidence do you have that any improvements there are in Malaysia towards refugees or asylum seekers will be long-term ones?
I have, as you know, a quite low opinion of the Malaysian government. I've been gay-baited and Jew-baited by leading members of UMNO in that government, so I have a very low opinion of them. But I have a very high opinion of the Australian press and the Australian media and the UNHCR, and I believe if those people get there, the Malaysian government will have a lot of other people to deal with apart from me.
So essentially it's better to have Malaysia in the tent, included as part of the process?
If the whole democratic process is involved in the tent too, including the media and the UNHCR, yes.
And what do you think would happen if Tony Abbott said no to these amendments to the Migration Act? Would the government have to move back to onshore processing?
We'll have to move back to onshore processing. We'll have no choice. And the concern for Australians will be is that the boats will start leaving from Indonesia and Malaysia, and we'll have no offshore processing way of dealing with this, as the previous governments did before this High Court ruling, including, I would point to the much more humane way that Mr Fraser dealt with this in the Vietnamese boat people area. We had offshore processing, but the refugees were gotten out to countries as soon as their issues were dealt with.
Do you think that Australia should be pushing other countries who don't take refugees now to begin to take them?
Well, I think this is the beginning of the process with Malaysia. I can see this sort of opening them up to settlement within Malaysia. It's difficult for all of the countries, the few countries that take refugees at the moment, to deal with the 80,000 in Malaysia, the 100,000 that are in other places. We need other countries where there will be settlement.
And should that include other countries in the region, countries like Indonesia as well? Well,
I certainly think in case of Malaysia, which is an economically progressive country, if somewhat democratically challenged, that they have the capacity to start looking at these kinds of things. If you have economic progress and you become part of the World Trade Organisation, and you're expected to behave according to certain higher standards.
Michael Danby, thank you very much for your time.
Lyndall.
And we'll just cross now to